Hi guys. Um, so today's video is pretty much just kind of explaining and going into depth about my gestational diabetes. If you guys watch like every other single video of gestational diabetes, and being pregnant, it's actually no different from everybody else's pregnancy videos as far as their story. I'm going with GD, but everyone has different story, everyone has different diagnosis, everybody is kind of doing the different thing, but we all are pretty much doing the same thing. So right now what I'm doing is kind of just explaining you guys my story as far as how I was diagnosed, my experience with it, and kind of what I'm doing to control my diabetes. Just because if you guys have seen my vlogs, I don't really go into detail about it besides you guys seeing me doing my blood test and then also me talking about me taking insulin and what I'm going to eat. So this video is kind of just going over more in depth of how I was diagnosed and everything. So, that's what's gonna go ahead and happen with this video. Again, if you guys also been watching my vlogs, I don't have a camera right now because my camera is still doing the thing where it's telling me it has an error. So that's why I'm not recording with my phone and I'm recording with my laptop to kind of talk to you about the story. So right now the background is pretty much just my kitchen. So bear with me, guys. This is just kind of how the video is gonna go ahead and go. But as of right now, I'm just kind of gonna go over the story and let you guys know. So, to kind of start off, I found out I was pregnant, or I didn't really find out I was pregnant for like until a month after I realized I wasn't on my period. And to not really go into detail about my anxieties and stuff like that, I was on anxiety pills and I didn't know. I noticed that I thought I wasn't getting my period because I was on anxiety pills, but when I told my psychiatrist that, he said that he was going to order for me to have a blood test. And then as soon as he told me that, I ultimately just thought maybe I should take a at-home pregnancy test, and that's when I bought the Clear Blue boxes and got into a pregnancy test. I took the test and found out ultimately that I was pregnant. So that's kind of just what happened as far as me finding out I was pregnant. And then I went to my primary doctor. She referred me to my OB, and I went to my OB appointment. And then kind of going into how I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes was when I went to my first OB appointment at 9 weeks. She said that I had a lot of sugar in my urine. And then as soon as she said that, she ordered for me to have my glucose test, so the 1 hour glucose test that everyone is taking right now if you're 24 to 28 weeks, the glucose test that you take the drink. She ordered for me to do that really early on, so I did that, and ultimately I thought when she said that I had a lot of sugar in my urine, she asked me what I drank or what I ate that morning, and I did have a smoothie, and smoothies do contain a lot of sugar, so I ultimately thought it was just that, but at the same time, I have diabetes in my family. So my mom was pregnant with me when she was pregnant with me with gestational diabetes, and she had it also with my brother. And then my dad and my dad's side is actually diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So all of them have type 2. My mom does have type 2 now, but she was pregnant with me with GD at the time that she was pregnant. So that's kind of how I knew also that I was going to be diabetic at one point in my life because I had such a strong family history of diabetes. So as soon as I found that out, I told her that, and that's why she also ordered for me to be a early on gestational diet or early on glucose test. So then at 11 weeks, I went to go take my glucose test, took the hour drink. I did the fruit punch one, which actually wasn't too bad. But the thing is that I did close my nose during the test because I didn't want to really taste it. So I closed my nose and then I drank the whole drink within 5 minutes, and then I waited that hour. And a lot of people now that are taking the test are as far as me. I am 26 weeks, and people that are taking it now for people that are due in October, they are they said they've been getting sick, but I didn't get sick when I took my test. So I don't know. Maybe it was just that was because I was so used to the sugar or something like that. But pretty much before I took the test, you're supposed to fast, and you're not really supposed to eat anything sugary. And I think the one thing that I did do before I took the test was I did drink a glass of milk. So I have a feeling that the reason why my number was so high for my glucose test was because I had a glass of milk. But pretty much as I just said, I took the test, and 2 weeks later, my OB called me and said that I was a high at 307 for my glucose test. So that diagnosed me as a pre-diabetic and not just a gestational diabetic. Pretty much, if you are taking a glucose test, at least at my OB appointment, she said the range you're supposed to be at was like 140, and even if you fail by like 1 point, you have to take the 3 hour test. But I was way above. I was at 307, and when I got the call, it was a little hard for me. I started crying. I pretty much I was at work. I talked to her about it. I freaked out, and I kind of sort of like, well, what's gonna happen now? Pretty much had the same kind of reaction everyone else has. Like, what to do now? What did I do? Like, how do I protect this baby? And because I was so early on, I was just so scared because of all the risk and stuff like that. And I felt like I'm gonna have such a long time until I give birth, and that anything could happen now that I'm GD. So it was really hard for me at first, but when I talked to my OB, she kind of described to me about how I need to go to a dietitian, I need to go to high risk OB, and pretty much that I'm going to be having a lot of doctor's appointments and be on a diet plan. But she did this kind of like describe to me like how everything's going to be okay, as long as I take care of myself, and that it will be all okay. It's pretty much just what she was saying. So that kind of made me feel good, but at first, like it took a really big toll on me. Like I was always crying. I kind of didn't feel good at all that whole day. I actually went home because I didn't feel right. Like I felt like a failure, even though a part of me kind of knew that I was gonna be diabetic at some point, and if I was diagnosed diabetic at my pregnancy, then I shouldn't be as surprised. So that's kind of just a story of what happened when I found out. Um, so just kind of going over into me being with a dietitian and a high risk. So that whole week after I found out I was a diabetic, I called my dietitian to schedule for a consult and do the class for an hour, and then I scheduled with my high risk OB. So I scheduled it all for a Friday, and this part is kind of me kind of going over my high risk OB because some point of my pregnancy, my high risk OB has been kind of tough on me. So, sorry guys, I needed to take a break for a second because I'm running out of breath every time I talk. Okay, so going into the story about when I first saw my OB, so my high risk OB. So when I went to go see my high risk OB, I generally didn't know that I was supposed to see my dietitian first and then see him. So when I first saw my high risk OB, I met with the wife of the high risk, and then they were all kind of like confused as to why I was there without any numbers yet from my dietitian. And I told them that, well, this is my first time that I was diagnosed. I'm only 11 weeks pregnant, and I wasn't told like what I was supposed to do. So it was kind of a weird experience at first, and it kind of not irked me, but it was like, well, I didn't know. So they were kind of just like kind of not rude to me, but they kind of gave me this feeling that I was supposed to do something that I didn't know that I was supposed to do. So but generally when I went in and I met with the wife, she kind of went over GD for me, kind of described my appointments with the high risk OB and kind of see how I'm going to be. And then at that appointment, they took my A1C1, which A1C1 is pretty much the diabetes test, or another diabetes test where they prick your finger, they check your blood, and check your glucose. And they did that to me, and I was at a 9, which is really high. If you guys have seen the A1C1 scale, it goes from a 6 to a 13, which 13 is really high, and 9 is like kind of in the middle, but still pretty high, and a 6 is like really good. So I was at a 9 when I first took it at 11 weeks, and ultimately my high-risk OB ultimately said he wanted me to be on insulin, he wanted me to start testing, and he ordered for me for prescriptions, insulin, and stuff like that. So again, a lot different from not a lot of gestationals, but the typical gestational diabetes, because not a lot of gestational diabetics are going to be prescribed right away with insulin. But if you are like a type 1 or a type 2, they might have you be on insulin already, or I think type 1 is where you're already on insulin. So, well, like I was saying, I was prescribed with insulin right away, and I was prescribed to get a glucose meter and everything already. So that's kind of just what happened at my high-risk OB, and then later that day I went to my dietitian appointment. So I met with the dietitian, kind of told her my situation, that I was early on, and it was kind of a weird situation because everyone in that room was pretty much like a lot further along than me, and I was only at 11 weeks. So for someone that was having their first pregnancy, they were early on and going to this appointment or going into this class and kind of being one of the youngest ones, and also kind of just there and still early on, it was kind of weird because it just felt like, well, this kind of sucks for me because I have a long way to go. So that's kind of what happened at the dietitian appointment. She went over everything as far as my meal plan goes. I'm on a 2,000 calorie diet, and I'm also on insulin, so that's what I had to tell them. And we went through the whole class, kind of described everything. So in my case, I know everybody's different, but you generally have to be like 120 or below after meals, and for your fasting, you have to be about 89 or below, which is different from some people. Some people have to be a certain amount with fasting and a certain amount with their 1 hour meals, but that's typically how they set it here at my classes. So I went through the class, and from there I went to Walmart and got my prescriptions and pretty much got everything I needed for my insulin, which is kind of what I'm going to show you guys as far as what I do. So first off, okay, so my doctor or my dietitian prescribed me, or he actually gave this to me for free. This is the One Touch Vario Flex, and generally what I get with it is the One Touch Vario strips. These ones are the 50 ones, but my insurance gives me 100. So these are the ones that I use. This one, it comes with your own little pricker, and then you can go ahead and adjust it to like a 7, I believe. I always use it to like a 4, and I always prick it with my ring finger or my pinky finger. And at my dietitian appointment, they did go ahead and kind of went over how I'm supposed to use it. And with these ones, I have had mixed reviews with it. Some people said that these ones are inaccurate. Some people have been using it. But this is the only one I use. I was thinking about getting a different one, but for now, I'm just using this one. So that's what I use for checking my glucose meter. And then the insulins that I am taking. So I use Humalog. Humalog is the fast reacting insulin, and this is the one I use. I know a lot of people are using different ones, but this is the one that my high-risk OB said to use. I don't know if it's because I have a higher glucose level or what it was, because I know some GDs are not using Humalog and some people are using like a more lower dose, but this is the one I've been using for the past 6 months now. So I use this. I have to use it in the morning, my dinner time, and that's pretty much it. So in the morning I use this one like 4 units of it, and then my dinner time it's about 6 units. So I use this. And then I have Novolin N. Oh, and that one is going to be my long-reacting insulin. This one I use a lot of. So this one I use in the morning as well with my Humalog. So I usually mix these two together. And this one is pretty much, I use 10 units of this in the morning. I do about 26 units of it for my fasting. And the reason why I'm so high at 26 units is because I am at 26 weeks and I'm getting a lot bigger. So my fasting numbers kind of have been all over the place. So I've been a little bit higher for my NPH. So Novolin N is the one I take, and then I take these two together in the morning. And then I have a lot of my alcohol pads. I keep these in my bag right here that you guys seen in my vlogs. These are the ones that I keep everything pretty much in this bag so that I can take it with me anywhere that I need to be. And then I have insulin syringes. So I get prescription permanent insulin syringes. I don't do like the pump or anything like that. I actually do the injections, which for me, the injections are actually not that bad. I typically do it on my stomach. I was going to do it on my thigh, but I've been used to it on my stomach. I feel like my left side is a little bit more sensitive than my right side, but the injections are not as bad as I thought it would be. And this is what typically is what the syringe looks like. It's really small. It's like the tiniest needle ever. And generally this one goes into 50 units, and I typically, the highest that I've done, it was 26. So this is my insulin stuff. And then to keep track of everything that I do for my blood sugars is I keep it in my planner. And this is what I generally do. So I have a box right here, and then it'll tell me like my fasting, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then just typically I keep track of it there, and then I write it on a piece of paper that my high risk OB does. So that's what I've been doing as far as keeping in touch or keeping my diabetes in control. And just kind of going over as far as everything of how I am doing. So at first, when I first took the insulin, I was very sensitive to it. I would always have low blood sugars as soon as I took like the fast reacting, and I had a reaction. And when you do the reaction, it kind of feels like you're getting really hot, and then you feel like you're about to like pass out, and which is really scary, because if you are crashing and you feel like you're gonna pass out, it can be really bad, because if you pass out, it's possible that you can go into a coma. So that's kind of what freaked me out. But my OB told me that I'm supposed to have like a glass of milk, or not a glass, like 8 ounces of milk, and then see if that works. If that doesn't work, then to use 4 ounces of orange juice. And when I first started, I actually started eating like a banana or like peanut butter or like some kind of piece of candy, like some kind of sugar, to help me get back to my blood sugar that I needed to be. So that was just kind of how the first week went. And then my first week, as far as meals go, as hard as I was trying, I had a very high spectrum of different numbers. So that first week, I actually had to go to my first trimester screening for my high-risk OB. And this is where it kind of gets a little hard for me to like say that I like my high-risk OB, but the high-risk OB that I'm going to is the only high-risk OB in my city. So when I went to my first trimester screening, he went over my first numbers, and the first thing that he said was that he thinks that he needs to bring the hospital in. So that's generally how it started with my high-risk OB, and he kind of was making me feel bad for me having high range numbers, and then said that if I'm driving and that I have a blood sugar crash, that I can crash into someone and that I'm going to kill someone, and pretty much that I'm going to go to jail, lose my license, stuff like that. And at first, it was really hard for me to really get along with him at that point, because it was just like, why are you telling me this at my first week of actually having a gestational diabetes, um having to go through all the changes, having to do all this stuff, and because I have my first week was so all over the place, that you kind of are telling me everything that is gonna scare me in my gestational diabetes. So at that point, after he said that, he was just pretty much saying that his only blessing was um, for me to go into the hospital and to be monitored. And at that point, I was just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Like, that's just going to be a waste of money. And he even said himself that if I go to the hospital, it's going to be a lot of money. And this was also where he kind of says like a bad comment where he's like, it's going to be more than your income. So, as you guys can tell, when I went to this appointment, it was kind of like a really crappy appointment. And this is what made me feel horrible about my gestational diabetes and made me feel like just giving up. So that is how that all happened at my first trimester screening. But at the end of the day, I told him that I wanted to wait and see how my second week goes, and then I'll let him know what I'll do. So after that appointment, again, I was having a lot of not mixed reviews. I was having mixed feelings about my high risk OB. I was mad, and I didn't feel good. Like, I didn't know what to do. And even my boyfriend was at that point pretty much telling me like, well, what are we gonna do? And we really have to get in control for your diabetes. So I tried really hard as far as what I was eating. I tried to drink a lot of water, and my numbers, I was still having some insulin crashes, and I called them about it, and pretty much every time I tried to call him about it, he said that, well, I still think you need to go to the hospital. So at a point after that first week and after the second week of me trying to get help from him, it started feeling like I wasn't going to get the help that I needed unless I go to the hospital. So after that week, the second week, I finally decided that I'm just going to go ahead and go to the hospital, and I went to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and it was a Monday, and I got admitted into it, and pretty much I had to stay in the hospital for at least 2 days, 3 days, and honestly, the only thing that they ever did was pretty much they took my blood sugars, they made sure I was eating on time, they made sure the type of meals that I was eating was good, and everything was pretty much something that I could have done at home. But because my high-risk OB felt like he couldn't really figure out what was going on with me, that's why I went to the hospital. So when I was in the hospital, it was all good, but there was a lot of miscommunication in the hospital as far as like the nurses and my high risk OB and what my high risk OB wanted from the nurses. Because there was a time that in the morning where they were giving me my first insulin in the morning before my breakfast, and I asked the nurse if I was gonna get food before she gave me my injection, and she said that the food should be coming in 5 minutes, which the food ended up not coming for another hour. And this was me taking my 1 hour or my fast reacting insulin. So I had a blood sugar crash, and I felt like I was gonna pass out, and the nurses were running to get me food. And after that, it was kind of like a mess, and I was just like over the whole hospital thing, which was alright. That was like the only bad thing about the hospital, but after a while I was just getting over it and I wanted to go home. So luckily my high risk OB told me that I can go home after the second or third day, and let me out that night so I can go ahead and go home. And he found out that it was basically, for me, it's just a diet. It's nothing to do with like my insulin, nothing to do in more chemically for me. It's more a diet for me to be in control. So just kind of going over that's just my story as far as me realizing that I only have to focus on my diet, and I just need to be diet controlled for me to control my diabetes. But that's also kind of the story with my high risk OB, as far as having a situation where I felt like I wasn't gonna get the help I need I unless I went to the hospital. And by all means, like, I'm not a doctor, or I'm not a nurse, or like a medical advisor. It's just kind of seeing how watching different gestational diabetes stories, and all the YouTube videos, because I feel like there's not a lot of YouTube videos about gestational diabetes. When I first was diagnosed, I asked my doctor about it, and she told me to pretty much YouTube it, and there's a lot of videos of it. But when you're pre-diabetic, or you're diagnosed as someone with a really high glucose score, and you're watching YouTube videos, you're trying to Google about gestational diabetes, it's mainly moms, or mainly pregnant women that have been diagnosed at like 24 to 28 weeks. You don't really see people that are diagnosed at early on, or you didn't really see a lot of people that are showing what they had to go through it. So I hope, as far as this video goes, and I can help, or not help, but pretty much like relate to some of you that have been diagnosed pretty early. Because I was diagnosed at 11, technically 9 weeks, and I already knew that I had a history of diabetes. So this is more for someone that knows that they have a history of diabetes, and knows that they've been early on diagnosed, or they're pretty sure that they're gonna get diabetes during their pregnancy or after diabetes. So I'm not trying to tell people that there is a very big difference with GD versus pre-diabetes, because no matter what, when you're diagnosed at pregnancy, you're gonna be treated like you're just having gestational diabetes. Even though some parts of it, at the end of the day, you have to realize that as someone that is a pre-diabetic, you do have to realize that you are going to be a diabetic after, and you really have to take care of your body and be well controlled after. With that said, I'm not really active. I feel like I go to the gym, but I don't go to the gym often. I do like to do a lot of cardio, so whenever I go to the gym, I do go and the treadmill, or I do some kind of cardio like running, the elliptical, the bicycle, stuff like that. So that is something that I do. I do like to go exercise sometimes, but not very often. As far as like my eating goes, I'm Filipino, so as a Filipino, I eat rice, and there's a lot of foods that include a lot of carbs. Our spaghetti is like full of sugar. We eat a lot of foods that contain a lot of carb intake, or they create sugars. So as a Filipino, it's hard, because you can't really control the food that you eat, or you can, but because I like live with my boyfriend, and I'm not living at home with my mom always makes Filipino food. And here at home, I make like food that is not anything to do with carbs, or I try to. But there's sometimes as a Filipino that I crave Filipino food. So being diabetic is kind of funny when you're Filipino, because you're eating foods that are a lot more carb intake and probably not very diabetic friendly. And then sometimes I crave a lot of Mexican food, and I crave Mexican food like nothing. So that includes a lot of corn products, a lot of carbs. So it's hard being diabetic, and personally, I don't know how I'm gonna do it after my pregnancy, because a part of me feels like I'm probably still gonna want to eat the way that I used to. I used to drink a lot of Dr. Pepper before I was even pregnant, so that has a lot of sugar, and now I have to settle for water, or like the Spindrifts or sparkling water that doesn't include sugar or carbs. Um, so it's definitely an experience when it comes to trying to figure out what I need to eat, um, and just being knowing that I'm gonna be diabetic pretty much for the rest of my life. I know that I have to work on working out, be more active, work on my diet, but honestly, right now, this is the most controlled that I've ever been with my diet. And kind of just to really make some of you guys feel better, as far as it, or not make you guys feel better, but to feel a little bit better, that helped me feel better about my gestational diabetes, or my diabetes in general while being pregnant, is when I went to my pediatrician visit. So when I went to my pediatrician visit, it was the prenatal visit, and this is where you basically just meet with a pediatrician and you get to know the pediatrician that your baby is going to see when they're born. So when I visit her, she could tell that I was stressed out. It was funny because I was like, I knew right away when I went to that appointment that had to tell her that I was a gestational diabetic, or I was a diabetic, and that I was nervous about me having the baby and the baby having low blood sugar, because when you're diabetic or you're gestational diabetic, the likeliness of what could happen when your baby is born, worst case, is the baby will have a low blood sugar. So I told her that I was nervous about that, and what would happen if my baby did have low blood sugar, like what the worst case scenario was, because I wasn't afraid of knowing what the worst case scenario was. And I know a lot of people don't want to know that, or don't want to think about it, but for someone like me, I need to know these things to be prepared, and what I can do to make me feel better. So I asked her, and she automatically, she was like, don't worry about that. Don't, honestly, I could see it in your eyes. You're stressed out. Don't worry about it. And I was just like, okay, like I won't stress about it, or try not to. And she pretty much was like, I see moms all the time that are gestational diabetic. It is very common. A lot of people have it, or a lot of moms do have it, and it's something that is not as big as you guys think it is. So that kind of relieved me, but I was just like still freaking out, or as someone like me, I'm just always still thinking the worst of things. And she was just telling me that the worst thing that could happen is the baby going to the NICU or the NICU, just for like 2 or 3 days. And the only thing that they really do when your baby has a low blood sugar and they go to NICU is that they give the baby a glucose gel. So they give the baby a glucose gel. They pretty much have to like swab it or something in their mouth, and then the baby stays in NICU for about 2 days, and then the baby is fine. And that was how she described it to me. So when she described that to me, I was just like, wait, really? That's all what happens? And then, I mean, she did tell me like the worst case scenario, like if the baby's not doing so well and stuff like that. But she said that most cases is that that's what happens, and the baby always turns out fine. So as coming from someone that is going to be a first time mom and first time pregnancy, that kind of relieved me, but it did make me feel better as far as what happens when you are a gestational diabetic, or when you are a diabetic that is pregnant. In most cases, if you guys have read online, or if you guys are reading online, most cases GD is pretty safe and the baby always comes out healthy. So that's why it's, to me, thinking about it, or when I first thought about gestational diabetic, was I thought it was the end of the world. And I know some of you guys are probably thinking it's the end of the world, with you guys being diagnosed now at like 24 to 28 weeks. but really it's just the fact that my pediatrician said that, and from reading and actually listening to her, it made me feel good because I know that I just have gestational diabetes and that my baby is most likely going to turn out fine. And it might be the fact that the baby is going to turn out big, or a lot harder for me to really give birth because the baby might turn out bigger. But for me, my baby is weighing where he needs to weigh, and he's growing at the rate he needs to grow at. But as far as like other moms, I'm not too sure. But that was honestly something that made me feel good when I found out, when I talked to my pediatrician and being gestational. And for someone that said that I was looking stressed all the time, she definitely kind of helped out of being calmed down. And with that said, guys, that's my gestational diabetes video. I'm sorry, again, I don't have a camera and this is not the greatest quality, and I probably didn't explain everything I wanted to explain in this video, but this video is going up as far as just like how my gestational diabetes goes. If you guys have any questions, you guys can always go ahead and ask in my comments. If you did like the video, you can like and subscribe. And I'm not a medical advisor. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I am just going with the flow with my gestational diabetes. I don't think I'm the greatest person when it comes to my diet. I'm not someone that is going to tell you guys what you have to eat, what you need to eat. It's pretty straightforward. You can always go ahead and look up more gestational diabetes videos on YouTube, or you guys can look it up and see like what's the best meals. And the one thing that I do agree on, though, that everyone says, the string cheese is pretty much the best thing you can eat when you are gestational diabetic, because it is a lot of protein and it's a great snack form. So honestly, it's no different from everybody else as far as this video goes. That was just my story. I'm a pre-diabetic, but right now I'm taking it as I'm a gestational diabetic. But I am going with the flow, and I pretty much just want to tell you guys that you don't really have to worry about anything, because at the end of the day, if you're doing what you have to do, your baby's gonna end up okay. But with that said, that's just me. That's just me kind of being real with you guys and letting you guys know that that's what I was told. And I'm just trusting everyone's judgment, everyone's talk. And I don't expect people to really listen to me. I just kind of wanted to tell you guys how my story went down. And yeah, but again, I'm sorry that I'm not the greatest when it comes to recording videos. This is my first time ever doing anything like this. I know I've always been trying to record videos when I was younger and create content, but now that I'm actually doing more of it, it's definitely different. So thank you guys for watching, and I will definitely be posting more videos as far as my vlogs go and my planner video go. If you guys want to see anything in particular as far as like what I actually eat when I as a gestational diabetic, or what kind of lunches I do, definitely let me know. But other than that, thanks guys for watching.